Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Bernadette Smith, and I'm here representing Nova Star Prep. I'm going to go ahead and get us started tonight so I can be conscientious of your time that you're giving up in a workday evening. So we will get started now. Few housekeeping things. The chat technically is disabled, but if you have questions, the Q&A will be open all night, and I'll be referring to it, but I'll definitely have time at the end to refer to it in more detail. And, as people trickle in, I'll just keep letting people in and we can go from there. But again, I want to be conscientious of your evening and to get to the point of why you're here tonight. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If for some reason something doesn't pop up, feel free to send a note in the Q&A and I'll make sure it's there for you. But we should have no problem. Just go ahead and share this now. So as you all know, tonight we are discussing demystifying the digital SAT. So this is a topic you're going to hear about a lot. You've probably been hearing about endlessly at this point, where it's a big change coming for the SAT. So if you have high school students or younger, or if you yourself are a high school student or middle school student, this is something that your guidance counselors, your schools, your friends, upperclassmen might be talking about already. We want to get ahead of this. We want to make sure that families feel supported. And I want to make sure that I answer any questions you might have throughout the evening. So with that being said, I'll dive in to just a little bit about me. My name is Bernadette Smith. I am the Academic Programs Director for Nova Star Prep. Essentially, that's a role where I partner with schools and their PTAs, their booster clubs, their guidance counselors, administrators, anyone that's there to create programming and more opportunities for their students. A lot of this involves SAT, ACT prep, other testing like high school placement tests, language tests, AP testing, things along those lines, as well as international baccalaureate. And we also do work around college essay workshops, creating different programming that schools need to help their students get ready for life after high school or transitioning from middle school to high school. Basically, we run the gamut of education, and we also help schools do some fundraising through our educational opportunities. Beyond that, and how I got into the field of education, I am a licensed school counselor, have been for 10 years here in Massachusetts. And, I've worked with high school age students throughout my entire career, both in public and private school settings. So everything college readiness is near and dear to my heart. And as a parent, an educator, and a school counselor, the announcement of the digital SAT was certainly a long time coming, but it comes with its own concerns, transitions, and certainly a lot of questions. So again, that's going to be my hope tonight, is to make this as streamlined as possible for all of you and to give you an opportunity to feel a little bit more at ease about what feels like a massive shift in the College Board's testing. And again, just a couple little things. I've been 15 years as a writing tutor and instructor at the college level, so I'm also very attached personally to the college essay. So certainly that's another topic that I present on regularly, and I hope to see you at some of those. So to the next slide. Tonight we're going to cover 4 pretty important pieces of the massive shift to the SAT. 1, the changes in general, what you need to know, what's different from what it was before, what's staying the same, general overview. Then navigating Bluebook. Bluebook is the app that students will use to take the test. This is something that every student will have to download when the time comes to take this test, and it will be a platform that they'll need to use for test day. And obviously, it's recommended that students get familiar with it beforehand. That being said, this might feel familiar to some parents and students, as some state level testing has gone to more digital means or using school-based technology, whatever it might be. So naturally, a lot of things are shifting in this direction. Then we're going to talk about the concepts that are being tested. What's changed? What stayed the same? What are they going to throw you for a loop with? What do kids need to be aware of before heading into the test? And then we'll touch on the ACT, because this could change your preference based on which test you want to take, or it could make you even more secure in the fact that you want to take the SAT. So we'll do a comparison there so that you as parents or you as students can really start to weigh the pros and cons of either test for you, one experiencing a great deal of changes, one staying the same for the relative near future. Okay, and here's one piece I want to remind those of you who are here right now. Once we get to the end of our presentation and get through some questions, I did want to let you know that those of you that are in attendance tonight will be able to receive a free consultation with one of our success advisors who are, this is a position that is one of the reasons I work for Novastar. It's an incredible piece to our team where this is a person that is there to listen to what your student needs, what their goals are. We have no cookie cutter approach to tutoring, and they can answer questions you have about test prep, AP testing, whatever is on your mind, subject-based testing, whatever the need is there, or the area of which you might want some more confidence. And they can just talk to you a little bit about some options that are available to you, absolutely free of cost. And then we'll also give you a free session if you decide to buy a package with us. So when we get to the end, I'll share all the links with you. You can move forward with that. And with that said, let's dive into the digital SAT. Okay, so right now we are in spring 2023, even if it doesn't feel like it, and we're not technically at the exact date. But the digital SAT hit the international students in the spring. So this was this test date here in March, and other test dates that they've piloted in special schools across the United States that were pre-selected for this have begun taking the digital SAT. For PSAT items, we're going to see some changes about that over time. Right now, those are still going to be paper-based. Same thing for the fall. When we get a little bit later in the school year, you're still going to see that the United States will be taking the paper SAT throughout the fall and through that final winter test date in December. So as of right now, March, May, June, August, October, November, December, those are still paper-based tests. Unless you're at a school piloting the program, you will not be able to take the digital SAT until the spring of 2024. So if you are a junior, if you have a student who is a junior, it is extremely likely that they will not find themselves coming into contact with a digital SAT. But for sophomores, freshmen, and younger students as they progress through the next few years of their educational experience, this will be the test and it will be the only option. And so, as I said, spring 2024, that's what it is. International PSAT and school-based testing in the United States will be digital. And so, why the change? You heard me mention at the beginning that part of this is stemming from the fact that everything's going digital. We're taking more and more tests online. Certain tests have been online for years, including, many postgraduate tests like the GRE, the LSAT, things of that nature. But we've also seen other tests go online either because of the pandemic when they tried to do AP testing, or over the years when we've seen state level testing. And here in Massachusetts, we've got the MCAS test, which has gone online. I know in other states, they've also moved towards that. One, to streamline it, safety concerns, things like that. Basically from, when we're talking about the, vice president of college readiness at the College Board, they're saying that this is going to be easier to take and more relevant. Our students are living in a digital world. They've been using technology throughout their educational experiences. This is supposed to match up with that. And they're saying that this digital platform is going to develop more possibilities and make the assessments have, any kind of advantage possible. The other piece we're seeing to this too, and this is, of interest to parents, colleges, other stakeholders, counselors, you're going to get the results a lot faster. You're not going to see a wait time of weeks and weeks after test date waiting to find out when they're going to release your scores, especially with the popular test dates. That's often been a concern. So this will impact, one, just that desire to want to have your scores and know how you did, but also if you're coming up on a college deadline, whereas before you were waiting several weeks, now you're going to receive it in days instead of weeks later. So it could, create a safeguard for some schools that maybe you add to your list last minute and didn't take a test in time for it. Maybe you suddenly add a November 1st deadline and you want to make sure that you get those scores in. This would be one advantage to that as well. And, sheer curiosity and wanting to know how you did. Enhanced security. They're very hopeful that this is going to alleviate some of the concerns around, we saw this last year, some tests that fell off a truck. That's not going to be an issue. It's going to eliminate a lot of concerns in the past about cheating and looking at other tests because the tests are going to be on different screens and they're all going to be different. So they see some advantages there as well. It's going to be saved like in a multi-save pattern so that we're not losing tests because of a technical issue or something like that. And the flexibility of administration. This is going to allow schools to accommodate more students who are taking tests, not worrying about, oh my goodness, we didn't order enough tests for test day. This is going to allow for more flexibility and the ability to accommodate students closer to test day. And this being said, here's a huge caveat. You will still be sitting in a test center. This test is not going to be taken in a student's home. So if your high school is already test center, that will likely be the place that you take it. If you travel a little bit outside of your town to find a test center that works for your test day, it still will be a test center. We will not see this test at home. And again, if you have a question, feel free to pop it into the Q&A. I've got it right in front of me. So I know it's a lot of information, a lot to digest. We will get through all of the pieces, and I have a lot of good news that should alleviate any concerns as well. So let's just compare the basic changes then. What we're going to see is that here's the basic. One was a paper SAT. Now one's going to be either on the computer, laptop, or tablet. Students will not be able to take it on their phones. It's not a big enough screen. It's not going to accommodate the app appropriately. There's certain components to it that will not work on a mobile device. And I don't think most students or parents would want that to be the case either. Availability, you can still take the paper SAT through the fall of 2023. So up until like the end of fall semester being that December test date. So if you feel strongly about taking the paper-based test, keep that in mind because you will not be able to choose it come spring 2024. And I'll get into a few asterisks around that as we continue, but that's something to keep in mind. If you know that your student or yourself prefer a paper-based test, that's something to really take into consideration. Timing, this is something that some students are going to be really happy about. The digital SAT is going to be significantly shorter. We're going to see it coming in at about 2 hours and 14 minutes rather than the 3-hour duration that the paper test takes today. You'll see that there's been a combination of putting the reading and writing together for 64 minutes, and then we're seeing the math in one section for 70 minutes. So the way that this is going to work, you're going to see it in a module-based format, but essentially they've tried to streamline it so that you're not doing a reading section, pausing, going into writing and language section, pausing. We're bundling, but we're also reducing the time. Again, younger students might be thrilled to hear this. The calculator will be allowed throughout the test now on the digital SAT instead of just on section 2 on the previous SAT. So if that's something that will bring your students some sense of calm, if they have some math anxiety or just like the reassurance of the calculator, the digital SAT will be all calculator all the time. So that will be a built-in calculator on the app, and students will still be allowed to use College Board approved calculators on test day. So some good changes there, length of test that had been really long, exhausting for students. We're also seeing the use of the calculator. And for the sake of guidance counselors and admissions counselors across the world, we are seeing no change in the scoring. So we're not going to need to compare scores or use a chart to find a comparison between the old SAT and the new SAT, as we did many years ago when the scoring did change and then changed back. We're going to see this as the same type of scoring, comparable, comparable between the two. Okay, so some additional significant changes here. So this is probably the biggest piece. In my opinion, the fact that it's online and digital now is not the biggest piece. The biggest component is that the test will now be adaptive. For those of you who may have taken adaptive testings and postgraduate settings and things of that nature, this may be fairly familiar to you. But just to give a quick overview, essentially what this means is that the test is going to be split into 2 modules, as I mentioned before. And the first module will have some easier, average, and difficult questions based on the students' responses and their performance on that first module. The app is going to use its artificial intelligence and use its adaptive nature to determine the difficulty of the questions in the second module. So this is a big shift, obviously something that could not happen on paper. And it's something that, really needs to be taken into consideration when we're talking about prep for the test. We're prepping a little bit differently in the sense that we're putting a greater emphasis on the performance in the first module, not for the entire test and based on success level, but knowing that it has an impact on the second piece of the test. So, this is something that we do get a lot of questions about, and what does it mean if I get too many easy questions and how are they going to score it? And that is part of the scoring is the same out of the same numbers and they're doing the same things, but they are going to be, changing the weight of some of the scores. So basically, this is kind of how it will affect the student. The question difficulty in the second module is based on their performance in the first. So they're saying from the College Board's mouth that this is going to be a more efficient assessment and more tailored to the experience of each student. When I say that, I say from the College Board's mouth right now, we just don't have all the data yet to see what that exactly means. Do I believe it should produce a more efficient test for students and produce, reduce some of the anxiety around test taking and things of that nature? I do. As more of the international scores become available to us over the next several months, I do believe we'll have a better picture of what this might mean and some comments from students as well. And we'll move forward with that and from commentary from the College Board. But as of right now, it's really important for parents and students to understand the adaptive nature of the test. This is something that, can affect students in a variety of ways. One way in particular is if you are a student with a disability, you actually will be allowed to take the paper test in the spring of 2024 if you have a documented disability that states that you have the need for accommodations, whether that's 50% extra time, extended breaks, separate environment, whatever it might be, they will give you the option to take the paper test. As you can imagine, however, though, the paper test cannot become adaptive. So in that sense, students need to take into consideration what that means for them. My suggestion in those scenarios, talk with your resource teacher, your 504 coordinator, your guidance counselor, and really talk about the nature of the test, work with one of our test prep experts, and really understand what that's going to mean for you. Is it about the breaks? Is it about the extra time? Do you want to try the adaptive? Do you want to stick with paper? Does the paper test actually work better with your strengths and weaknesses? It's something to take into consideration. The College Board has responded to questions about it, stating that it's not going to affect the comparison of test scores. Again, I'm looking forward to seeing the data on that. And this is something I'm hoping to also put a short webinar together on once we are fully aware of what that can mean scoring wise. But again, they're saying scoring will be exactly the same. So that's one piece I did want to mention first and foremost, because I do think it's really important to note that it's not just digital, it's adaptive. All right, so looking at the adaptive structure. Essentially, this is somewhat repetitive here, but to give you a breakdown of it so that you can visually see what this might look like, it's going to be the reading and writing module 1. They're saying that that will identify the student's likely score range. This is similar to things we've seen in the past in terms of using mock tests and things of that nature to be predictive in nature. Module 2 will adapt then in return to the student's responses from section 1. This will target their score range in order to more accurately calculate their actual skill level. So rather than throwing a bunch of extra difficult questions at them, they're going to throw more in their target range. Then the students will go through a break at that time. Then the math module 1 will begin. At this time, again, the test is going to identify the student's likely score range. And just like the reading and writing section, module 2 will adapt in response to module 1 and more accurately calculate their skill level. So again, this is the piece that I think parents have some of the greatest questions about, and this is the piece that is the most different from tests of the past years. All right, so I'm going to take this chance to just pause and see if anyone wants to throw a question into the Q&A. I know that was a lot. If you want to save it for the end, that's totally fine as well. But next we're going to move on to Bluebook, which is the actual test taking app. So just give everyone a second if you want to insert anything to the Q&A. I'll just make sure we're good there. Let me take a peek over here. Okay, not seeing any questions just yet, but feel free to pop them in. I'll get them by the end. All right, so now we're moving on to what to expect with Bluebook. It's a very simple app. I've been using it. There's a desktop app, a tablet app, everything of that nature. You're going to see a testing timer. So that's going to alert students to how much time they have left on every section and give them a chance to really time out how they respond to their questions. For students who find that nerve-wracking, you're also able to dismiss the timer. So they do give you that option. However, when there are 5 minutes left in the test, the timer will return so that you're aware of how much time has passed and that it's almost time to wrap up. As I mentioned, there will also be a calculator that will be available throughout both math sections. Again, students can use their own calculator as long as it's College Board approved, which you find on the College Board website. There will be a formula reference sheet that students can reference throughout both math sections and use at their discretion. In the reading and writing section, you will see an annotation function where you can highlight specific phrases, make a note about it, use that to refer back to it when it comes time to answer the question. You can also bookmark pages throughout the test for review. So for instance, if a student was struggling to answer a question in module 2 of the reading, they could bookmark that question. And with those 5 minutes remaining, go back to it and use the full 5 minutes to answer a question that might have been more difficult for them than some of the others, or might have just required a little bit more time on the reading excerpt. So that's a great feature there, just the bookmarking and allowing students to really manage the place they are in the test and make sure they go back to the questions they want to refocus on. There's also an option eliminator, so it allows students to visually cross out, 2 of the responses in a multiple choice so that they can feel confident about, saying, now I've got a 50-50 shot because I feel really confident about what I've eliminated. And so that's another helpful visual tool. Question menu will just allow students to click back to whichever question they want instead of just hitting the back button 6 times, get back to question 1. They can just select the question. So that's meant to save a little bit of time. And certainly, as we can with most devices, but built into this app as well, students can zoom in, pinch the screen, see what they need to see. For students with visual disabilities, also, there's going to be ways to adapt the screen to make it bigger. Certainly they're going to cover the gambit of disabilities there. One side note, as somebody with a background in English and someone who annotates a lot, I will say the annotation function is not ideal yet in the sense that it's time consuming. So you do need to highlight, make a note, save it, and then open it up again when you come back to that question. Great feature, just might eat up a little bit of time if you're planning on spending less than a minute on every question. So just something to keep in mind. And when we think about test prep, that's something that our test prep experts will be working on with students, ensuring that they're not eating up too much time on the annotation, but using it to the best of their ability. And again, that's going to be on a student by student basis, who would need help with that, who would feel comfortable with it. Some students choose not to annotate. Some might just do a quick highlight, just like a letter to remind themselves to come back to it. But you don't want to be taking excessive notes on it because it will eat up a lot of your time. All right, and so as you can see on the right there, that's just the basic sign in. This is what it will look like for students. And for educators who are working on the testing side of this, they will have their own dashboard to log into, see how students are progressing along with the test as they sit there as the proctor of the test in the testing centers. And students can download Bluebook now. It is available right now. So to get familiar with it, to take a look at some of these features that I mentioned here today, seeing the testing timer, what the calculator looks like, bookmarking pages, you can kind of get a feel for what the test will be like. And, before the test, this would be, we're looking ahead to spring of next year, but students would be asked to log in weeks before, months before, just to get familiar with what they're going to be using this platform for. There are free practice tests in there and test previews where you can look at certain questions, get a sense of what the questions are phrased like. Again, very similar to questions in the past, but it's great to see the format and to get a sense of the timing, especially since the timing has changed. And then, before the test, certainly I would recommend working one-on-one with a Novastar test prep expert. I recommend that in general for the SAT and the ACT, but with the test changes of this nature and this magnitude, I would suggest it even more strongly now based on the fact that your child or you yourself as a student are going to need some individualized support around getting ready for a test like this and understanding its adaptive nature. So again, one thing to keep in mind there, that this, certainly there's going to be a great deal of prep available to this. Might be a case where one-on-one is of particular interest. All right, and so, you're going to download Bluebook prior to test day, as I noted. You're going to have to make sure that your device can stay on for 3 hours. So this means fully charge it. I think we've all been there where, you forgot to charge your Chromebook the day before school and you get to school and the teacher doesn't have an extra charger for you and your Chromebook dies and, things of that sort happen. It's really important to make sure that you charge it fully, bring it ready for test day. Different school centers are going to be prepared for this and have extra laptops ready to go. Certainly students who do not have access to their own laptop will be accommodated by their schools and by the College Board. But just practical, get it charged up the night before. Think of it as the same thing as getting a good night's sleep. You want to make sure technology-wise you're ready to go. As in test days of the past, you need a photo ID, admission ticket, pen and paper. You cannot bring your own scratch paper, but you will be provided some from the school. So, arrive early like anything else. That's our suggestion. And then once it's time to go, the proctor will put a code on the board. The students will enter it. The test will begin. So with this being a little bit different in that students might finish a section before another student, in the past, they had to sit there until the proctor announced the next section would start. Now, a student who perhaps finishes the first section 10 minutes early can choose to just use it as a break and wait for the next break, or to dive into the next section. So you will see some students having a break earlier than other students, and some students will be taking the full time. So just a slight difference, somebody might be having their snack with 10 minutes left versus somebody who might be going up to the wire. And again, you're still able to bring snacks and certainly water. So now, let's get to the meat of the test. What concepts are being tested? Big overarching sentiment here is that it's really not changing drastically. This isn't like in years past where the College Board changed the test in an effort to make it more reflective of what students learn in high school versus what they could learn in college. This is that they've changed the format of the test. They're still testing the same concepts, but you're going to see the way that it's bundled together a little bit differently. But for everyone's reference, let's go through it a little bit just for the familiarity here. So in the reading and writing in the content domains here, we're going to see that it's going to be about craft and structure. So this is about reading comprehension, vocabulary, one's ability to perform analysis, using those reasoning skills that the SAT is known for, and knowledge needed to use certain words, phrases in context, and to look at text rhetorically. So this is where we're going to be doing some of that reading comprehension and answering some of those multiple choice questions. For information and ideas, we're going to see comprehension, again, analysis and reasoning skills, and the ability to locate in a text and then interpret and evaluate information and ideas from the excerpt that a student is given. So this also could involve different graphics, tables, bar graphs, things of that nature. So you see some of it's about like the craft and the structure, where the next piece is also about using visual information to interpret and integrate that into your responses. For reading and writing content domains, again, over the last two, then we're going to see some standard English conventions. This hasn't changed drastically. We want to make sure that students can edit text appropriately to core conventions of standard English. So this is punctuation, usage, sentence structure. This is where the semicolons versus a colon comes in. This is where we're going to be looking at, the syntax of a sentence and if it's worded correctly and the words are in the right order. Then, as one can imagine, we're going to move on to expression of ideas. This measures the ability to revise text to improve their effectiveness and how that written expression is, getting out to the audience, and to meet specific rhetorical goals, which will be spelled out in the questions. So again, they're spelling out all the sections for us, but I really do want to reiterate that it's not drastically different from the past. They've just connected both sections together instead of having a reading section separate from a writing section. All right, so we will see 54 multiple choice questions on this, split into two 32-minute modules, total time 64 minutes. Certainly, if students have accommodations, whether it's 50% extra time, 100% extra time, that timing will change. And as any student might be thrilled to see, just like it has been for the last couple of years, there is no essay and no concern around that. So then for the math content, and again, feel free to ask questions. I know this is a ton of information. First and foremost, they're going to deal with algebra. That's going to be fluently solving equations and inequalities, analyzing and solving equations and systems of equations using multiple techniques. We do see a greater emphasis of algebra on the SAT versus the ACT. So if you are a stronger algebra student than a geometry student, the SAT typically is a better match for you. Then we're going to see some advanced math. You know, this could be understanding absolute value, quadratics, exponentials, rationals, radicals, and other nonlinear equations. So again, as you talk to your children about this, or as you assess yourself and what you want to take, look at your familiarity with these topics, get a sense of where you are with it, and, you know, make sure that you're looking at this kind of test material to see where you stand with the varying levels of math tested. Problem solving and data analysis. So again, applying quantitative reasoning about ratios, rates, proportional relationships. Geometry and trigonometry. So you're going to see that both geometry and trigonometry on the SAT, the PSAT MNSQT, and the PSAT 10. You will not see trigonometry on the PSAT 8-9. They know students have not had an opportunity to take that content in their 8th grade experience or younger. So you will not see any trigonometry questions on that. However, taking the SAT, you certainly will, and the PSAT. So keep that in mind. If you will see some geometry, if you much prefer geometry though, you will see far more of it on the ACT. All right, so 44 questions for the math section. Roughly 28 to 32 of them will be multiple choice, and 8 to 10 of them will be student produced. So these are like the questions in the past where students had to fill in a number or a decimal on a series of blank spots. They'll need to do that on here as well. It'll probably likely be, you know, an open text box where they can type it in that will also have different symbols they can use. So usually just a few of those between 8 and 12, but that's, again, not different. It's just going to look different. And the total time is 70 minutes. So I just mentioned the ACT a few times here and mentioned one of the big differences between the two tests. And so what I want to make sure I cover here is no school prefers the SAT to the ACT or the ACT to the SAT. So one huge piece of, you know, reasoning here is that you do not have to pick one that you think the school would like to see. Even if, you know, geographically you're seeing more students in your area take the SAT than the ACT. For example, in Massachusetts, we do see far more students take the SAT test from the College Board versus the ACT. However, as I mentioned before, if you are a stronger geometry student and struggle with algebra, the ACT can be better matched for you. Again, if you are stronger in algebra, the SAT might be better matched for you. But let me break out these digital SAT and written ACT differences for you because they might factor into your decision making. So again, obviously, digital SAT is on the computer. So we're going to see a blend of comprehension, analysis, rhetorical, and grammar skills in the writing section. English on the ACT, blend of rhetorical and grammar skills. ACT is staying paper. They said they're not changing it anytime soon. And they also said they're not changing their content anytime soon. We should not expect major changes with them in the next few years. For the math test, you're going to see a blend of math skills. But again, I do have to reiterate, you're going to see more geometry than algebra. Reading test, again, blend of comprehension and analysis. And then there's a science section on the ACT. So again, this does not have to be that, you've taken every level science in high school. They are going to be testing your ability to read different science excerpts, understand some basic biology, things of that nature, but it is a component. And if that is a tough spot for you, you may feel more inclined towards the SAT. So these are all the reasons why I strongly suggest that students take an SAT mock test and an ACT mock test. We do have a conversion chart that allows us to see which test you did better on, or allows you to see, hey, I kind of did exactly the same on both. I feel comfortable with both. Maybe I'll take both, or maybe I'll take the one with the math preference I have and focus on that so that I can target my SAT prep towards that one test in particular. So again, this is all based on personal preference, strengths and weaknesses, and what you want to focus on. But if you know that about yourself or about your student, whether it's about the math piece or the science component, that's an important piece to take into consideration. And also another reason why a mock test is an incredible opportunity to really get a feel for which test is better for you or your student. And again, no essay on either test. They have moved away from that, and it's not necessary, nor are any colleges looking for it. So digital SAT advantages. The digital SAT is shorter. Some students, the exhaustion of a 3-hour sitting for a test can really factor into, especially to that last section of the test. The digital SAT tests fewer grammar concepts. So one thing that happens on the ACT, they do test about 15 concepts, where there are 10 tested on the SAT. May not seem like a giant difference, but that does account for 5 different point sections when you're talking about a student who may or may not feel a lot of strength in this area. Digital SAT, as I mentioned earlier, students will receive their scores within days rather than in weeks. Students will still receive the ACT score between 2 and 8 weeks. We see closer to the 8-week span for the most popular test dates, 2 to 3 weeks for the less popular test dates. Digital SAT disadvantages. Some students prefer to take a paper test. They prefer the pen in their hand. They prefer that kind of experience of crossing things out and just the way that they are able to work through, that kind of high stakes test, physically doing it rather than on a screen. Some students have different attentional issues with screen use versus paper. That's a factor that families, counselors, teachers, and tutors need to take into consideration when we're working one-on-one with students. Again, as I think emphasized greatly earlier, the digital SAT is adaptive. The student's performance on that first module is going to determine whether or not that student will end up in a higher scoring bracket. That's a real factor and something really to consider as you make test decisions and test prep decisions. It's imperative, absolutely critical, that students try their best on that first section so that they can allow themselves to enter a higher bracket in the second section, if that's ultimately their goal. So I'll take, one more thing about ACT disadvantages. They do have what we refer to as time wasting questions. So the way they phrase these, like, tell us every concept except blank in this multiple choice question. Or the think in reverse ones. Choose the part of these 4 sentences that's grammatically incorrect instead of having them select the correct one. These little time wasters, maybe it's 10 seconds, 5 seconds, but it does add up when you're trying to spend 1 minute per test question. So think about whether or not that could be a factor based on attention span, exhaustion towards the end of the test, whatever it might be. And this is a huge piece here, especially for that mental drain that I just mentioned. The reading test is the 3rd section on the ACT. At that point, students are exhausted. This is still a lengthy test, and they're just getting to the reading at the end. I've had students tell me in the past that was a factor, and they felt like they either didn't have enough time because they weren't reading as quickly as they could have had maybe it been the first section, and they also just were exhausted at that point in the test. So again, there's always pros and cons to both tests. This is a disadvantage on the ACT side. So before I get to planning ahead, I did want to address a Q&A question. How can students start practicing the SAT digitally? Usually we buy workbooks for the paper SAT. True, right? And the content of the workbooks still very valid, but in terms of the prep, you're going to want to be able to take a practice digital SAT. And as I mentioned before, work one-on-one with a tutor. So at Novastar, we are poised to offer digital SAT mock tests and to do so on a regular basis so students will become adept at these tests, familiar with these tests, and will not be encountering them for the first time on test day. Getting the data from a mock test, even if it's the paper mock test right now, receiving that data and seeing the sections that your student needs to work on will allow you to tailor test prep directly to your students' needs rather than hopping around a workbook or looking up different things online. This will allow a test prep expert to really go through your students' results and tailor every hour of prep directly to them so that we're working on their weaknesses and not overdoing it on the strengths, so that we're working with what they're apprehensive about rather than what they feel extreme confidence in. This will allow students to really have a personalized test prep experience. One, in general, that's the best way to do it. But the second piece is this test is new. This is a major transition. This is going to be one where that one-on-one support is going to be the most helpful. And then starting with a digital SAT mock test with us at Novastar is going to be one of the best ways to dive into this, because you're going to get results that are going to allow you to say, okay, this is what I need to do next. Or it might say to you, man, I really want to take the ACT on paper, right? And then you plan accordingly for that. That being said, we are in the first spring of the international students taking the test. We are going to see more data. We're going to see more practice tests come out. There's going to be different versions of practice tests so that students aren't constantly taking the same one over and over again. But I would say we want to be looking at one-on-one tutoring, digital practice tests, logging into Bluebook so that you do see the practice questions on there and what they look like, and then using the data from all of those experiences to create the best test prep plan. For any test, we recommend a student starts at least 3 months out from the test date. 2 months is all right as well, but we don't want to be coming up too close to it. And especially for such a massive change like this, the sooner the better. And as I mentioned before, Novastar is ready. We've known this was coming for quite a long time. The writing's been on the wall. The College Board's been teasing it. And we've been doing our diligence. We are ready to support students in this way. And this webinar is one of the ways that we want to alert you to the changes, but also assure you that we're ready to take on this challenge with you and your students. All right, so that actually segues nicely into planning ahead. We got to decide on a game plan to attack these changes. Whether or not the content's fairly similar, students are going to sit in a different experience than what they had been told the last several years. Even if your student's a freshman, they may have heard about the SAT before this. They may have taken the PSAT on paper in 8th grade. They might be taking one this year. So one thing I would say, you got to approach this like studying for any test you're unfamiliar with, but even step that up a level with this one. Because as an industry, we're all going into this together. Yes, we've been doing our research, but we're waiting for some data. You got to do the one-on-one support. And then you got to participate in SAT or ACT prep. Certainly look out for this in the future, but even though some schools have gone test optional, that policy isn't as optional as you may think. And topic for another day, but I hope to see you at that webinar as well to go over that topic. So if you're uncertain about your performance on the digital test, here's step number 1. Take one before 2024. Even if you're a sophomore right now and you're going to be a rising junior, take one in the fall of your junior year. You will have multiple test dates available to you, including August, October, November, and December. If you want to take one now, you certainly can. Do understand that it tests a little bit later than this, but it's a really good starting point. You're going to have all of these test dates, March, May, June, August, November, December, to see if the paper-based test is better for you. Want to do it in a lower stakes environment with all the support in the world? Take one of our mock tests. We do them virtually, but you still have the paper test experience with a proctor. You do receive your scores much more quickly than you're going to receive them from the College Board, sometimes in days. We get those back to you. Then you're able to meet with one of our test prep experts, go over your scores, and feel confident in the plan you're creating. You don't necessarily want to go into this planning blind. You want to go into it with the facts and with an expert who has been leading students through test prep planning for years. And this is the way to do it. So certainly feel free to register for a College Board test, but take a mock test with us. You're going to find yourself in a position to, one, it's going to be rather affordable. Two, you're going to get a test prep expert, and you're going to get a detailed score report that you can run with in terms of your test prep. So best case scenario to find out if you want the paper or the digital, start with one of our paper tests. Then take the, if you're on the younger side of school, sophomores, freshmen, 8th graders who are rising into 9th, take the digital SAT in the spring of 2024 and take the ACT and compare scores. See how you feel. We have ACT mock tests as well, but compare your scores. Again, we have several conversion charts we can use to ensure that you're getting the best score possible on either test and which one you're most comfortable with. But you can't get to the prepping part without trying some of these options, right? Like, we want to make sure you have the details you need and the data you need to confidently move forward with your test prep. And so we do have some upcoming virtual mock tests. One is very soon, and you can still register. We have an ACT mock test this Saturday at 9 a.m. And I will share all the links with you in the chat as well, so you can easily copy and paste them, and feel free to take a screenshot of this link if you would like to as well. But we do have an ACT on Saturday, runs from 9 to 1. Your students can register all the way through the end of the day tomorrow and have an opportunity to say, here's what the ACT looks like for me. Here's how I did on it. Now I can start making some decisions or plan to take an SAT mock, which conveniently we also have on April 22nd. We'll see another SAT mock on May 13th and another ACT mock on May 20th. So these are the paper-based mock tests. The digital ones will be coming after, and we will be continuing offering mock tests every single month, multiple times a month throughout the entire school year, summer. We're doing test prep all year long because test prep happens all year long. And so we'll continue sharing dates. Make sure you sign up with us for text messages and things like that, and reach out to us to get on our newsletter, because we are offering mock tests all the time. And again, you'll get the results in a couple of days, and you'll know where you stand and what you can do next. All right, just to go into test prep a little bit more, 98% of Novastar test prep students achieve or surpass their target scores on the SAT. And by surpass, we're not even talking just about a little bit of a few points here and there. We're like this example here where we're seeing a student that improved their ACT score by 8 or 9 points. Considering the ACT is scored on a 36 scale, that's pretty impressive, because that's a massive leap to make on a test that only goes up to 36. And that's through their work with a Novastar Prep one-on-one learning coach. In general, and this is according to the College Board themselves, as little as 6 to 8 hours of personalized prep can lead to an average score increase of 90 points. So imagine if you put more into it. Imagine if you start dedicating your time now, putting yourself in the position for scholarships for different school categories that you might be interested in, for that dream school that is keeping the SAT and has a very strict score range. So if 6 to 8 can get you to 90 points higher, imagine what dedicating to the next several months can do for that test score. And in general, 55% of high school juniors improve their scores when taking the test again as a senior. So you're going to want to take this test more than once. Familiarity-wise, just getting a few more months of school under your belt, you're going to see that score go up. We're not saying you need to take the test 7 times, but taking it more than once does help quite a bit, and continues to give your tutor or your test prep boot camp, anything of that nature, more data to work with to best tailor support to you. All right, so as we get to the end here, so next steps, you're going to have to determine your personal testing goals. What is your goal around the SAT in general? Is there a score you have in mind? Is there a school goal you have in mind? Are you so unsure, understandably, that you need to start from scratch and get a baseline from both tests and see what they mean for you, so that if a goal does pop up next year where it's a school that you're in love with and you know that they need a 1350 or above on the SAT, or you know you're going to want to search out scholarships and a lot of them are SAT based. Now's the time to start identifying those goals. Take an ACT or an SAT mock test with us. That's going to be one of the quickest ways and one of the most efficient ways with the most data-driven, results that you can possibly get to start identifying those next steps for yourself. Whether it's, okay, I know the ACT is not for me, now I've eliminated it and I can focus specifically on SAT, or you take the SAT and you're like, man, my algebra skills are not where I need them to be. You're going to be able to walk away with the information you need to make the best test prep plan possible. Speak with a professional. And when I say that, I certainly mean us at Novastar. I mean our learning coaches. You saw our statistics, you see what we can do and the scores that we're reporting and the confidence that we're seeing. But also talk to your guidance counselor about schools and things like that. Talk to them about your GPA and where you stand right now. Talk to your parents. Get a sense of what you want to do and what you need to do next with your post-high school planning. And then create your test game plan with a one-on-one coach. Going into it blind is going to be difficult. Yes, there are a lot of resources in the world, but you want to tailor it to you. Don't do unnecessary work on one side of the test when you can be focusing the energy on what needs the most work. All right, just a few little things before we get to that deal I mentioned at the end. I did want to let you know, speaking of the post-secondary plan, we do have a webinar coming up on March 22nd. So next week, the keys to building the college list. You will see same time, same place, but this one will be, you'll still see me there hosting, but this is going to be run by Carla Goodwin. She is an admissions counselor and an admissions expert. She is someone that you will want to hear on this because building a balanced college list is literally 50% of the battle of getting ready for college. You need balance and you need to get ready for the application process, really understanding your list, what your goals are, and that you have multiple options in front of you. So again, free webinar. I'll share this link at the end as well, but feel free to jot it down or screenshot it now. It is extremely worth your time, and I would strongly suggest attending. After that, I'll see you all on April 26th for a college application must-dos and don'ts webinar. Again, free. Feel free to pass it on to people as well if your students are on the younger side, but I do recommend taking part in these on the earlier side anyway, because you're going to find out a lot about extracurriculars that students need to be paying attention to, different factors from 9th grade that are particularly important. So again, knowledge is power in this sense, and you want to be ready and you want to start thinking about this before, it's time to make that list tomorrow. So I'll share that one next. And last but not least, certainly feel free to into the Q&A, but I did want to mention that special offer that I highlighted at the beginning of tonight's presentation. We are sharing the link right here, and I will share it so you can click on it in the chat in a moment, that if you sign up for a free consultation with us within the next 24 hours, that doesn't mean your appointment needs to be in the next 24 hours. But if you log on tonight, tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, and sign up with one of our education directors and make an appointment with them, you will be able to receive that consultation for free. Talk about the questions you have from tonight, talk about test prep packages that we have, boot camps we have coming up, one-on-one academic testing, whatever the need is for you and your student. And then if you end up booking a package with us, we're going to give you a free session, which is over a $95 value for your time and the dedication to, working towards a goal with one of your students. So this is an extremely good value. I would strongly suggest you do it. As I mentioned before, our success advisor, our education director, these are parents, these are professionals, these are people who know what your students need, and they've been doing it for over 15 years. So this is, you're not going to get much better than this, and you're not going to get much more lovely people than the people you'll be interacting with when you make this call. So I would strongly suggest that. If you have questions for me, easy enough email address, Bernadette@novastarprep.com. I hope to see many of you in our future webinars. And let me just make sure I put these links up here for you, and I'll copy them into the chat as well so everyone can have access to them. Let me just give me 1 second. This just might be easier for everyone if you can click on it there. All right. I'll just put this here too. So hopefully everyone can see those, screenshot what you need to, take all that information in because it's an extremely worthwhile deal. It's an extremely worthwhile couple of webinars that we have coming up geared towards college readiness. All of our webinars can be found in that 4th link you'll see there. So take a look at those. We have other ones coming up over the course of the next several months. And when you go to our classes section, that's where you will see the ACT sign up for this weekend. You'll also see our boot camps. We're going to have some college essay workshops coming up in the near future. So again, please take these links. Thank you all so much. Email me with any questions and have a really great night. Thank you. Take care.